Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Bava Metzia daf Ayin Hey. We are going to begin on the very last line on Ayin Dalmud Beis. Tanrabanan, Adam Chaver, a person say to his friend, as we continue at Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, Haveni Kor Chitin. Lend to me a core, a measurement of wheat, v'kotetz lo damim, and they evaluate that this is how much you're going to be paid, which is based on the market price. Huzlu, if let's say the price goes down, noisin l'chitim, he gives the wheat. Hukru noisin demehen. If it goes up, then he pays him its value. Ivoli katzatz. What do you mean? I thought it was already set. So Amarav Sheshes Achakarma im lo katzatz huzlu noitel chita hukru noisin lemehan. However, if it was already set, then you have to follow, of course, that which was stipulated. Okay. Probably should have seen that in yesterday's daf. Let's see the new Mishnah. Says the Masnisa. A person should not say to his friend, Halveni korchitin, that you should lend me a exact measure of wheat, and then later on a different date, a later time, I will give you the exact same measure of wheat. Now that doesn't seem to be very problematic because you're giving back exactly what you borrowed. So this is actually the source of, as we've seen before, sa, that you cannot borrow a certain measure of grain in order to be able to return that same measurement. This is, as Rashi says, this is not ribis katsutsa, this is avak ribis, which is a din rabbanan, and the issue is because the price may fluctuate or can change in between, and therefore it could end up having the appearance as ribis. But you could say Halveni ad shieva b'ni o ad shiemsa mafteach. We've had this line a couple of times already in this parak, that you could say that let me borrow the wheat until my son comes with it, or I get the key. So what does that help? So as we've also established many times, as Rashi points out, the kivan dieshlo shapradami, provided that this person who's borrowing the wheat really does have wheat elsewhere. It's just it's not here. Who, as we said, sabasa, that whole din is only din rabbanon. It's considered to be a vak ribis. So, as we mentioned, as long as the borrower has this grain, so therefore we consider it. And the problem, he just doesn't have it necessarily right in front of him. That's why he wants to borrow it. But since he still does have it, it's ki'ilu, like the malva already owns it, even without mashicha, which we said is a kula, because this is again a vak ribis, the chachamim were mekel. So therefore we say, once he has it, since he has it, at the time of the loan, it's not considered to be ribis, because it's ki'ilu, like the malva actually was kinda, so to speak, that wheat. The Hillel Oser, interestingly enough, Hillel disagrees, and says no. Sabasa is usher even in the case of Yeshlo. He furthermore said a woman should not lend a loaf of bread to her friend until they assess the loaf's value. Why? Because otherwise it's the same issue of Sabasa. Shema Yukru Chitim, let's say wheat goes up in value. V'nimsu boisli de ribis, and it could be an issue of ribis. So they hold that it's an issue of sabasa, even in the case of Yeshua. Says Gemara, Amar Rav Huna, we have a machlokas Rav Huna, Rabbi Yitzchak. Rav Huna says Yeshlo sa loivasa, assuming that you hold it to Tanakama, that in the case of Yeshlo it works, but how much do you have? So if the lova taka has a certain amount of wheat, so that's precisely how much he could borrow, but not more. Sasayim, lova sasayim. If the lova has 2 saw, then he could borrow 2 saw. But if he only has 1 saw, he can't borrow more than that. Otherwise, it's not considered to them as a case of yeshlo. Therefore, you can only borrow up to what you have and no more. Rabbi Yitzchak is chaylik. Rabbi Yitzchak Kaimer, feel yeshlo saw loiva kamakurim. No. As long as you even have 1 saw, you can even borrow many saw. It's not an issue. And Rashi says why. Each saw, we can say this saw that he has is for that. Shahari enu kenui lomalva, because it's not really being kind to the lender. Uviyadol oichla, because he could eat it right now, the lova. Umachor to sell it. V'nimsus oisa shalov and niskekas al perish b'shuk. Okay. So therefore, that's the din. Tani Rav Chia l'siyulu Rav Yitzchak. He actually says a statement to support Rav Yitzchak that you can lend out more money, more saw than the guy actually has. Tipas yayin. When it comes to wine, ein lo tipa shemen ein lo hayesh lo lovaleh kama tipin. The whole issue is that ein lo, there's nothing. Which is mashmas, as long as you have, you can even go above and beyond that amount per bar. The Hill Oyster. Hill says that even my yeshlo Salvasa is also. I'm Rav Nachman, I'm Shmuel, halacha k'Rabbi Hillel, halacha is like him, b'leis halacha is k'vasei. Actually, the halacha is not like him. So again, we're going to be lenient, especially when we're dealing with ribbis d'Rabbanan and tavak ribbis. And therefore, we paskin is provided that yeshloi, so therefore he could borrow the din of Salvasa is mutter. The case of lending a loaf of bread, or maybe Hudam and Shmuel Zudivi Hillel. That's only the sheet of Hillel. The Chachamim say more leniently that loivim stam uparim stam, that you could lend a loaf of bread without assessing its value, and that's okay. Says Rashi, loivin kikar stam below katzitzas damim, without assessing its value. Shlo hechmiru, where it haven't been strict ladaktik beisser savasa kol kach. We're not going to be as strict as Hillel. Yom Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, b'nei chabur hamakbidin zelzeh. If you have groups of people that are, let's say, sitting in one house, or they're on the road, and they're makbid one to another. Says Rashi, she'en moichlin al davar mu'et. They are not moichl even on a small thing to give to the other person. Umakbidin l'havo zed zeb b'midah b'mishkav b'minyan. And when they lend out, they do it with measure, with weight, with number. So oiber mishamido mishamishko mishaminyan. So in the event, says Rashi, on Shabbos and Yom Tovim, they're going to be over for all these different things you're not supposed to do on Shabbos, weighing, etc. Why? So the Gemara at the end, almost at the very, very end of the Masechta Shabbos, says the reason is Shema Yichtov, because you may write it down. You're going to borrow money, and they're so makbid, we're concerned that they're going to write it down. Umishin loivin a pirate, be yomtiv. So you violate all these dinim on Shabbos or yomtiv. Ukadivi Hillel af mishum ribbis. Hillel says you're also going to be chayav according to them ribbis. Yom Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel tamidi chachamim muturn livli mizeb ribbis. What? A Tom Chacham is actually allowed to charge interest? There's actually the Gemara before, not too long ago, said this whole thing about Yisaimim, that there's no din of ribbis by Yisaimim. So we say, ought to what? There's no, they don't have to keep the Torah. So it sounds like Tom Chacham not to keep the Torah. So the Gemara explains that doesn't really mean that they're violating anything. They're not doing anything wrong, because by the time the Midian did the ribbis asura, they both know that you're not allowed to charge interest. Therefore, matanhu di'oiva hadadi, they're just giving gifts to one another. It's an unbelievable heter. That's what it is. It's question 13a. Matam deshero tam chacham lubu zem rebis, because they know it's asur, and therefore they just give it as a gift to one another. Now, Taisus at the very, very bottom says nira davka davar mu'et. It has to be something small. Shioidea belibo shehenoisin. He would have given it to me anyway. If I feel matana moetas davka. Okay. So maybe this kula is not for like $1 million loan and charging tens of thousands of ribbis. No. Okay. I entices. Amle Shmuel Avua Bar Ihi. So Shmuel said, Halveni meya pilpulin, b'meya v'esrim pilpulin, v'arich. So he says, a person can lend 100 peppers for 125 v'arich, and it's proper. He's allowed to do it. What do you mean? How could it be proper? It's ribbis. So Rashi says, "V'shaper dami dematan ba'almahu." The extra amount is just a gift. You're allowed to charge your children interest. Again, it doesn't seem like you would be allowed to, but you want to at least you want them to taste what it's like to owe money. Very interesting. This teaches us that we want our children to be fiscally responsible. We don't want our kids to get into debt. So therefore, by teaching them the laws of basic personal finance, the difficulty of getting out of debt, especially if you have very high interest payments, so we want to teach that to our children, so they should feel it. The truth is, we don't think it's a good idea because we may already start getting them to thinking the opposite. This is a great way of making money, and it's of course usur. But again, on the surface, there's a very interesting vart. 13b matam de usur lilvais lebanav b'nei beis b'ribis k'nei l'hatminam tam ribis, because we're concerned mishum de asil misrach. We don't want to misguide our children. We want to make sure, even though it seems like it's good chinuch, but at the end of the day, you're teaching them a wrong activity. You could educate them the importance of being careful of their debts, but don't charge them interest, because by doing that, you're doing something wrong, and they're learning from your behaviors, and they may also eventually do it. Okay. Tremendous word. Next mission. Says Mastisa. Person can say to his friend, Nachashimi, weed for me, do this task in my field. Vanachish imcha, and I'll weed for you. Says Rashi, Hayoim v'niachish imcha l'machar. I'll do this exact same task for you today, and you'll do for my field tomorrow. That's allowed. Or for that matter, Adar imi ve'eder imcha. You'll hoe for my field today, and I'll do the same for you. Since you're doing the same work, it's mutter. However, you can't say nachashimi ve'eder imcha, Adar imi ve'anachish imcha. It can't be that you're doing different jobs. That's something which cannot be done. That's not allowed. It's a problem of ribis, as since they're different jobs, since the first person who worked did a harder job and didn't get paid, but the second person who worked, and therefore maybe it's considered like it's less money, so it's a question of ribis, because it's not necessarily going to be equal as far as the work that was done, because it was not the same malacha. So maybe one malacha is more than the other, and therefore it's really a form of ribis. Okay, continuing on Ein Hayamid Beis. So the Mishnah continues and says, Kol Yemei Garid Echad. All the days of the dry season is considered to be like one, which means, says Rashi, Mutter lo imru lo adar imo hayoim hazeh shel garid ve'eder imcha bayoim ploini shel garid. So you can do the same work, but even though it's not necessarily the next day, but since it's all during the same dry season, so therefore the task is equally difficult. Garid, Rashi says lashon yovesh. So that's allowed. That's kol yemi garid echad. Kol yemi revia achas. Also, when it comes to the revia, says Rashi, shimei revia, like during the rainy season, kashin l'malacha b'sadais. During that time, it's harder to work in fields because the ground is all wet and muddy, I guess. So therefore, as long as you're doing it during that same season, it's okay. But you can't do, I do one job, I do the exact same job as you, but during different seasons. Because even though it's the same job, but there may be a harder degree of difficulty to do it during different seasons based on the ground. And the Rashi again says, you may revia is kashil malacha b'sadis. It's harder to work. Ribis mukdemes, yesh ribis mucheres. Even though we saw that there was a miyut from a pasuk that excluded the isser of ribis if it's mukdemes or mucheres. What exactly is that case? Ketzad nasan einav luvay simenu. You want to borrow money. V'hu mishalech loy, and the lova gives a gift. The borrower needs to borrow money, but he gives the future malva money or something as a gift. Yomi b'shvil shetalveni. It's in order that you will eventually lend to me. Zuhi midas ribis mukdemes. This is considered to be ribis mukdemes, that you paid extra money or give extra gift before the loan. Let's say you borrow the money and you paid back, and then you give a gift afterwards. So basically it's the opposite. You end up giving him a bonus, if you will, after the loan is over, after you've already paid up your loan. That's also forbidden, at least according to the language of our Mishnah. Rav Shimon Omer, Yesh ribis devarim. Interestingly enough, not only is it an issue of ribis, of charging more money, but also with your words. Lo yarmelo dai, you shouldn't say no. Kiba ish ploini mamakam ploini, that there's some guy that's coming from such and such a place, which basically means you're like giving this extra advice, if you will. So even though you're not actually getting more money, but by doing this, you're kind of helping him out. These are the people that violate, and we've had this numerous places. The borrower lender as well as the co-signer, which we had a problem with that in the Gemara before, Edim and witnesses. Also the scribe, they're over these 5 lavin. At least we're dealing with the malva, we'll see. The Chachamim say, Afa Sefer Oivrim, Mishum Lo Titain, that's 1, Mishum Al Tikach, Mito, which is Rebus, Mishum Lo Tielo Kenosha, Mishum Lo Sasiman Lev Neshech, and Mishum Lifnei Ivo Sitin Mechshol. So those are the 5 different psukim in which let's continue before I get to it. Says the Gemara, Tanya Rav Shimon Yoicha Yerem when Noisha B'Chavera Mana the Einu Ragel Hachtim L'Shalom Shasol Hachtim L'Shalom. The Rabbi says something amazing. Not only if someone lends you money, you're not allowed to charge them interest, but if normally they're not friendly to you, and all of a sudden you are going to start greeting him in a friendlier way, that's also aser. Talmud Omer neshech called davar asher yishach. I feel dibur aser. So the diuk that the Rashbi makes, or Shimon Yochai, is that even a dibur, even a form of this is aser. Ve'elu oiben Omer Baya malva oiver kulan. The lender violates all 5. And this is an unbelievably difficult question right out of the gate. TA1. Al elu chamisha lavin nemer sha'over hamalva b'ribas. What are the 5 lavin that we say that the malva has violated in ribas? That's a really hard question. But you have to know all of these 5 psukim. Lo sitain, al sikach mi'itai, lo sielo kanoisha, lo sasimanu of neshach, lifnei ivro sitain mechshol. So those are the 5. I probably got a few right. That's a hard question to remember all those psukim. Okay. Regardless, the malva will violate all of them. Love over, the lender is only going to be over 3. Mishum lo sashech lachicha, lo achicha lo tashech, lifnei ivro lo sitain mechshol. He violates 3. The arev, the co-signer, va'edim, the witnesses, ein oivrim el mishum lo sisimon of neshach. They only violate this one iser. Tanya Rav Shimon Oimer, malvi ribis yoisim amashim arvichin mafsidin. The people who lend money with interest, more that they gain, they lose. Va'od ella shema simim Moshe Rabbeinu chacham v'toraso emes, that Moshe Rabbeinu, with his great wisdom, if I would have known that he would have benefited lo hayakaisvo. He would never have been written. What does that mean? It says Rashi, mafsidin mismoitetin l'oilam. As we saw before, that people who charge ribas, they lose out and they will never replenish their wealth. They lose everything. So that is what we derive from the psukim. But if Moshe Rabbeinu would have known this matter, lo haykaisa, he wouldn't have written it. Exactly what that means. Okay. Let's say you lent money to someone, you know the borrower just doesn't have the money on you right him now. You're not allowed to pass in front of him, even if you don't say a word, but he just sees you, the lender, and that's going to cause enough anxiety for the borrower. Okay. It's like you judge with two judgments. Shnemar, here kavta enoish l'roshenu. You're riding with sin on your creditor. Banu be'esh v'mayim. He's coming with fire and water. Amrei b'huda marav. Kol mi sheish l'mayim. Sin who has money. Ubava isai shulay be'edim. And he lends it out without any witnesses. Not smart. You violated putting a stumbling block in front of someone, because now all they have to do is just say that they never borrowed your money. And it's a big challenge, because a person may have the desire to deny the loans that you gave them. You're causing a curse on yourself. Okay. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, te'alamna, to mute the sifsei shaker, the lips of the false, hadoivrois al tzadik asuk, who speak of the righteous. Amalei Rabbanu Ravashi, kamakayim Ravina, koma de Amar Rabbanon. Ravina was makayim everything in which the Rabbanon said. Sholchle b'hai panya de mali shabda. There was an Erev Shabbos. Lishter limar asara zuzi. Lend me 10 zuz. Disramili katina da'ara. Because I came across this property. Lemizman. I want to be involved in the purchase. So sholchle nesimar sahadi. Get me witnesses. And nichtav. And I'll write that I'm going to give you this money. So Kasa, they wrote it up. Sholchle, and they sent it to him. So he said, I feel nami, even me. I have to have witnesses. In this case, you should trust me. So sholchle koshikain mar the tarid begirse mishtale v'garim klo atzmi. Certainly, because you're involved in learning, you may forget because your mind is preoccupied, and therefore it'll cause a curse for myself if I end up saying you owe me money and you deny it, even though you did borrow money from me. All of a sudden I'm causing problems. So therefore, no matter who, it should always be written down. Okay. Question 14. Madua asur lilvois mois loloshtar o8. This is also TB2. A lot easier question. This is question 14 rather. Mishul mifnei ivo sitin michshul. You're making it so that the borrower should basically deny it. And also you're causing a curse on yourself, because they're going to say that, you're claiming that this person who's a tzaddik doesn't pay his debts or something, and you have no proof to it. Tanrabanim. Shloishet Suakim, 3 people cry out to the courts below. Ve'enan nenin, but they're not going to be answered because they cause problems for themselves. As we said, if you lend money without witnesses, but if you acquire a master for yourself, which Gemara is going to explain what that means, or if a person whose wife rules over him. So what is that? You hang your possessions by a nachri. Says Rashi, Oimer mishtamish mehen shel ploini nachri heim. Shalashmiya atzmo pamim shanachri shamea umamid edim v'tayva b'dinehem. So if you end up saying that, the nachri may end up hearing, and they may take your money. Someone who writes all his possessions to his kids while he's still alive, or someone who has it bad in this city and doesn't go to another city because shana mazel, shana makom, shana mazel. Hanalach is a neshech, hanalach is a neshech, hanalach is a neshech. I can certainly say, Baruch Hashem, we finished very challenging fifth parak, and we're going to continue in tomorrow's daf with Seicher as Umanim Ad Kan.